one conversation that I've actually had, I had a Zoom call with an A&R guy this morning, and I was talking to a few people this weekend and getting vocals, doing these remote Zoom sessions. The way that people are being creative now, where they're forced to not be in the same room, and there's a lot of drawbacks. There's some benefits to that as well. But one of the big questions for every session is, who's going to cut the vocal? How are we going to get a good vocal? How are you going to vocal produce remotely? How do you vocal? The older I get, the more I realize that vocal is everything in this whole process. The lyric, the performance, the top line, the mix of it, all of that stuff. I mean, you talk about your mixes, you set them up with low end and vocal. Yeah. There are a number of questions about how do you get a good. We talked about a little last week too about mic technique. Yeah. People recording at home. I don't know if I have a specific question for you. I've just been thinking about a lot and talking about a lot. I had a song I wrote with an artist last weekend. She cut the vocal. She's a great singer and just has an SM7 and Logic and some basic interface, no compressor, no EQ, nothing like that. And I think it's probably just like right up on it and just singing in, and suggested to have, just to talk about mic technique and talk about performance. I know you're not doing Zoom writing sessions, but do you have thoughts about people that are recording vocals a lot for the first time at home and like how to think about that?
You kind of just hit on it. You said for the first time at home. I think people have been recording vocals at home for a decade now, right? So I would say 50-50. I'm getting home recorded vocals to mix. So that's where kind of last week's discussion talked about. I think when I think about mic technique, I think about trial and error. Most people don't know what it is, right? So now that you know what it is, ask yourself what that means. Google what that means.
Mic technique, you mean?
Yeah, mic technique. Look into mic technique. So that's the first thing we should talk about. Read about mic technique. Then do trial and error. Go closer. Sing the first verse. Go back. Sing the first verse again. How do you like it in the mix when it's not in your headphones? Make sure, like I said last week, your monitoring level. Check your monitoring mix. Make sure that you're comfortable, that you're not moving closer to the mic to hear yourself more. You're turning up the volume of the vocal in the box to hear yourself better, right? So I think you can get a great recorded vocal at home. I think you should pay attention to the distance between the walls where you are. Any nulls in the room. Don't be directly in the middle of the room. Maybe put a mattress up against the wall and face the microphone towards the wall.
Explain null to people. The idea of frequency being in between.
Cancellations between hard surfaces. So the rule of thumb is you don't want to be in the middle of a room for listening. And I don't actually know this to be the case fully, but I would imagine for recording as well, because the room is still activating the same way. So
definitely.
Again, Again, trial and error, right? So sing the exact same thing with the same emphasis somewhere else. Because when you're in the studio, there seems to be this aspect of trust, right? There's a professional recording engineer in the room. They put you in a spot. You don't even think this is subconscious. Oh, this is the best place for me to be singing because that person put me there. Yeah. I've never really thought about this, and I'm kind of just riffing out. But when you're in your room, you're all of a sudden not confident. So you're like, wait, this isn't a studio. Okay, well, let's make it a studio, right? So again, mattress up, maybe some bath towels, hang them on a microphone stand, just something that breaks up hard surfaces and reflections off that. Maybe do it near a bookshelf where there's some natural diffusion helping. Like, think about all these things, but trust yourself that you know what sounds good. So if you don't think it sounds good, don't send it to a mixer or the producer hoping that they make it sound good.
A vocal should sound good. If you have an SM7 and no compressor, I know you're just going on a little $200 USB interface, you should be able to make a good sounding vocal. And I guess it's probably just intimidating if you are someone, even if you record a lot of vocals at home, but all of a sudden you know that that's the only option. I think a lot of people record quote unquote demo vocals or day of vocals. There's a traditional way to think about that where, okay, well, we can go back and we can go to a great studio and do it properly, or we can go back and do it. Everybody should be an engineer and setting up their studio like they're singing a finished vocal every time.
The magic tends to happen in the demo, right? That's most of the time that's the case. So you want to capture it right the first time. And I don't think there's anything. Another topic that I wanted to discuss with you today was let's discuss why I don't like to talk about equipment or plugins. So that we can talk about equipment at some point. But partly because you nailed it with a $200 converter and microphone. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't advise that that's the best way to get the proper vocal. But yes, equipment aside, you should be able to put a performance into the computer or onto a tape machine that you can hear back and be satisfied with, and say that sounds good. I like that. I'm gonna send that to so and so. They're gonna touch it up. They're gonna level it out into the mix, give it more impact. But I gave the emotion that I wanted to get, and you could hear that through it. So gear aside, it's how to go about the process to begin with and how to trust yourself. So I think that's why when I hear people recommending different pieces of gear, it's like, well, what are you trying to get out of that gear? And then we can talk about that gear. But what you're talking about is how, in this crazy world right now, how do we get the simplest thing, the lead vocal, the simplest and most important part of production, to be captured? This is without that, you're going for the best instrumental Grammy. Like, that's not, I don't know. No offense to the people that go for that. But
congrats to everyone who's won an instrumental Grammy.
Or Mad Lib, like, I don't care. I don't care about your.
It's a different thing. Yeah, the setting up, I guess you were talking about before about setting up a studio, the basic things that a lot of people know, but maybe people haven't done a lot of, and I've done so much of, just making records in bedrooms and dorm rooms and living rooms and that sort of thing. Get rid of hard walls. And let's say thoughts on recording vocals on Omni. We talked about that a little last week. It just anything you can do to eliminate the room, because it's very likely that the room it will not be designed in an acoustically pleasing manner. Now, certainly recording in Omni in a studio that doesn't have parallel walls and has a nice thing, there's an effect to that, but it's pretty rare that people making records at home will ever have any need for that. And Omni, of course, if people who don't know, it's a pattern of the microphone where basically it picks up in all directions as opposed to a single direction.
We wouldn't do that in a bedroom unless you're going for a bedroom clap sound that you want all the reflections to come back to you on. Maybe flip to Omni for the clap track.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too, the ability to utilize the room for other types of sounds. If you're recording a vocal, blankets and coat racks, absolutely. I've put lots of blankets on microphone stands and hung them, like you said, over bookshelves. Put a mattress from a second bedroom that you're renting somewhere and putting it up against the wall so the wall isn't hard. I mean, anything you can do to knock down those high frequency reflections.
I think something to double down on here is to say that you can get a great vocal in your bedroom. I think that's something to reinforce here. It is very possible. So if you're not doing it, you're doing something wrong. So ask a friend, ask one of us, ask the internet how to do it, and don't stop until you figure it out, because there are ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Billie Eilish, the best example of that. They literally made that in a bedroom. But in a room that's not super boomy, if you clap and you hear a bunch of reflections, the room is too boomy. But then again, if you're trying to get a cool clap sound, amazing.
Yeah, exactly.